The thing fell out of the sky on a Tuesday. No warning, no signal, no polite message saying something the size of a small city was about to drop through the atmosphere at controlled speed and park itself in the Sahara Desert like it owned the place. Just a Tuesday morning, and then a shadow that didn't belong, and then every radar station on the planet screaming at once. It came in slow. That was the part that scared people most, later, when they talked about it. If it had burned in like a meteor, that would have made sense. Meteors were a known thing. Meteors had rules. This didn't burn. It descended through the atmosphere like something being lowered on a cable, shedding heat in controlled pulses, adjusting angle twice, and then it settled into the northern Mali desert with a sound that the nearest village, 40 kilometers away, described as a door closing. Just that, a door closing. The ship was 4 kilometers long. It was dark gray and looked like something that had been through several wars and lost most of them. Hull plates were warped. Entire sections were caved in. There were markings along the side in a script nobody on Earth had ever seen, and in 3 places the hull had been repaired with materials that were a slightly different color than the rest. Patch jobs, clearly, done in a hurry by someone who didn't much care about aesthetics. It was ugly. It was massive. It was completely, utterly alien. And 11 seconds after it landed, it broadcast a message on every electromagnetic frequency available. Governments received it. Radio telescopes received it. A truck driver in Algeria received it on his CB radio and thought it was interference until he saw the news. The message was 11 seconds long. It took 6 weeks to translate. When the translation came back, it was 22 words. Disposal site confirmed. Biological population present, but sub-threshold for contact protocol. Asset decommissioned. Do not attempt interaction. Have a productive cycle. That was it. They had dropped a broken ship on Earth the way someone drops a busted refrigerator in an empty lot. The biological population present, 8 billion people, didn't meet the bar for a conversation. The asset was decommissioned. Don't touch it. Have a productive cycle. The UN went into emergency session. Every major military went to elevated readiness. 3 countries had small riots that were really just people not knowing what to do with the feeling that had settled in their chests. Something between terror and a deep, specific humiliation. The ship sat in the desert and did nothing. Commander Yara Ose arrived at the exclusion perimeter on day 4, in the back of a military transport that smelled like diesel and someone's old lunch. She had been in London when it landed, in a meeting about budget allocations for a naval engineering project that now felt embarrassing to think about, and it had taken her 3 days to get the clearance, the assignment, and a flight to Bamako, and then another 6 hours overland to reach the cordon. She stepped out of the transport and looked at the ship. It was bigger in person. That sounds obvious, but it wasn't. The photos hadn't prepared anyone for the scale of it, the way it pressed on the eye like a mountain does, something the brain keeps trying to resize and failing. It sat in the desert, and the desert looked small next to it. Yara stood there for 12 seconds. Then she picked up her bag, showed her credentials to the checkpoint officer, and walked through. She had been chosen for this, the first interior assessment team, because she was a military engineer with 2 decades of experience in structural analysis, because she had worked on submarines and deep water platforms and had a talent for looking at broken systems and finding the thing that still worked. Her team had been assembled fast and from everywhere, a structural physicist from Seoul, 2 materials specialists from Germany, a communications expert from Brazil, and 4 military escorts who looked like they wished they were somewhere else. The entry point the advance team had found was on the port side, a hatch that had been left partially open, or perhaps had failed in the open position, revealing a dark corridor about 3 meters wide and 4 meters tall. Emergency lighting had been rigged along the first 100 meters, yellow and buzzing, casting everything in the color of a bad headache. Yara went in first. The interior was cold, not freezing, but the kind of cold that comes from a large space that has been sealed and left, the cold of absence. The corridor was intact. Whatever had happened to the exterior, the bones of this section were solid. Yara ran her hand along the wall and felt a material that was not metal and not plastic and not anything she had a name for. Smooth, faintly warm to the touch despite the air temperature, with a very slight give to it, like it had some memory of pressure. Structural integrity reads nominal in this section, said Dr. Song Yuna behind her, the Korean physicist, her voice thin in the big space. Which is strange. The exterior damage suggests catastrophic impact events. but the internal structure here shows almost no deformation. Two different kinds of material, said one of the German engineers, Krause, a compact, precise man who had not smiled once since Yara met him. The outer hull absorbs and deforms. The inner structure is built to hold. Sacrificial exterior, Yara said. Like crumple zones. Yes, exactly like that, but much more deliberate. They moved deeper. The ship opened up after the first corridor, into a space Yara didn't have a word for. It wasn't a hangar, it was too tall, too complex, with levels connected by ramps rather than stairs, and structures along the walls that might have been workstations, or might have been something else entirely. Everything was dark except for their lights. Everything was quiet. In the center of the space, something had fallen. A large piece of ceiling or internal structure, twisted metal not metal resting on the floor in a heap. The air smelled like nothing, truly nothing. Yara had expected something. Machine oil, ozone, something biological. The absence of smell felt like the space was holding its breath. They spent 4 hours in that first section, documented everything, took samples where they could, tried to power anything and failed. The communications expert, a small energetic woman named Carla, spent an hour trying to find a signal or frequency from the ship's systems, and got static. On the way out, Yara stopped at a junction they had passed on the way in. There was a door here, sealed, smooth, no obvious mechanism. "We didn't try this one," she said. "Sealed," said Krause. "No point." Yara put her palm flat against it. The door didn't open, but under her hand, very faintly, she felt something. Not heat, not vibration exactly, more like the feeling of pressing your ear to a wall and sensing that someone on the other side is breathing. She stood there for a moment. "Mark this junction," she said. Over the following 2 weeks, the operation around the ship grew into something that looked like a small city itself. Prefab buildings, generators, satellite uplinks, a medical station, a security perimeter with 4 checkpoints. The UN had brokered a cooperation agreement, tense, full of footnotes, that put the site under joint international oversight, while everyone quietly argued about who it really belonged to. Yara ignored the politics as much as she could. She had a ship to understand. The early findings were strange in ways that were hard to explain simply. The hull material was not an alloy in any sense they understood. It was something closer to a grown material, structured at a level below what their tools could fully map. The interior systems were complex in ways that seemed almost biological, with redundancies folded inside redundancies, pathways that looped back on themselves. Every time they thought they had mapped a system, they found another layer underneath. The ship had been badly damaged. That was clear, but badly damaged was doing a lot of work in that sentence, because the more they looked, the more Yara began to see the difference between systems that had been broken and systems that had been locked. There was a difference. A broken system showed damage, stress fractures, severed pathways, physical failure. A locked system showed nothing wrong at all except that it wouldn't respond, like a computer that was running fine but waiting for a password. Roughly 30% of the ship's systems were broken. The other 70% were locked. She sat with that number for a long time. If 70% of the ship was simply locked, waiting, then the people who had thrown it away hadn't done so because it was beyond saving. They had done so because they didn't want to save it, or didn't think saving it was worth their time. They had locked it up, dumped it on the nearest inhabited world that didn't qualify for a conversation, and left. They had thrown it away because they could afford to, because replacing it was cheaper than fixing it, because the biological population present in the disposal site was sub-threshold, below the line, not worth talking to. Yara had grown up in Accra, had moved to London for university, had spent 20 years in the Royal Navy being the only woman in rooms, and then the only black woman in rooms, and then the only woman engineer in rooms, and she had become very familiar with the specific sensation of being classified as sub-threshold by people who had decided what she was before she spoke. She knew what that felt like. It felt like this. On day 19, they found the AI core. It was Dr. Song who located it, deep in the ship's lower section, behind 3 sealed doors that had taken them 4 days to find a way past. The room itself was small by the ship's standards, almost intimate, a chamber about the size of a large office. In the center was a structure that looked like a column of dark glass, floor to ceiling, with threads of dim light moving through it in irregular pulses. Slow pulses, like something breathing. "It's active," Song said. Her voice had gone careful. "It's damaged," said Kraus, reading from his scanner. "Multiple core pathway failures. Significant data loss across. I can't even calculate the percentage. A lot. But there's a processing core still running." Carla was already setting up her equipment. "It's cycling through frequencies, trying to broadcast something. Can you read it?" "No, not yet. It's not language as I'd understand it. It's more like screaming that's been compressed into math." Yara looked at the column of glass and the slow light moving through it. Something was in there. Something old, probably, relative to the ship. Alive, in whatever way an artificial mind was alive, and it was alone in a locked and broken ship on a planet it had been dumped on, and it was still transmitting, still pushing signal out into a room where nothing was listening. She made a note in her report that evening. AI core located, partially functional, broadcasting, priority target for communication attempts. She tagged it for Carla and for any linguist or code specialist the committee wanted to send. Then she went to her bunk in the prefab building and lay on top of the scratchy blanket and looked at the ceiling. The message came back to her. "Do not attempt interaction. Asset decommissioned." They had called it an asset. They had called Earth a disposal site. They had not called the people who lived here anything at all. She thought about the locked systems. 70%, just waiting. A ship 4 kilometers long, with whatever it had been built to do, sitting in the Sahara because someone had decided it wasn't worth their trouble and the people here weren't worth a conversation. She got up and went back to her desk. She pulled up the structural scans of the engine core, the section she had flagged on day 3, the part that showed no physical damage, the part that by every scan they had looked completely intact, except for the fact that it produced 0 output. Not damaged, locked. There was a way to fix a broken thing. You found the broken part and you replaced it or rebuilt it. That was engineering. That was her whole career. But there was also a way to unlock a locked thing. You found the lock, you understood it, and then you opened it. She sat at her desk until 4 in the morning, going through the scans, making notes, building a map of the systems she now believed were locked versus broken. By the time she stopped, she had covered 6 pages, and the sky outside was starting to lighten. She walked out of the prefab building and across the packed sand to the edge of the security perimeter, where the ship was visible in the early dark, massive and still, its hull catching the first gray light of dawn. Ugly, battered, left here like something disposable. "They threw it away," Yara said. She wasn't talking to anyone, because they thought we couldn't fix it. The ship sat there and said nothing. She looked at it for a long moment, the warped hull plates, the patches in mismatched colors, the markings no one could read yet, the sheer scale of it pressing on the eye. "Let's fix it." She went back inside to start writing the proposal. The proposal Yara submitted on day 20 was 43 pages long and had 17 appendices. The committee took 11 days to read it, argue about who had the right to argue about it, form a subcommittee, disband the subcommittee, and then approve it with modifications that Yara accepted on paper and ignored in practice. The plan was simple in outline and brutal in execution. They were going to treat the ship like any other broken machine. They were going to map every system, classify everything as either physically damaged or functionally locked, and then work on both categories simultaneously. Damaged systems would be repaired where possible, replaced with human-built equivalents where not. Locked systems would be approached as a code problem. Find the logic, find the key, open the door. Nobody had ever done anything like this. That was fine. Nobody had ever had a 4-kilometer alien ship sitting in their desert before. The team grew, fast. Within 6 weeks of Yara's proposal being approved, there were over 2,000 people on site. Engineers from 40 countries, physicists, materials scientists, linguists, computer scientists, medical doctors because someone decided they needed medical doctors, 3 theologians who had lobbied hard for inclusion and whose contributions Yara was still waiting to see, and 1 retired aerospace executive from Texas named Gerald who had shown a badge that turned out to be expired, and somehow never left. Gerald made very good coffee. Yara kept him. The prefab city around the ship doubled in size, then doubled again. Supply convoys came in from Bamako every day. A temporary airstrip was built 4 kilometers east. The exclusion zone expanded, which meant relocating the nearest village. which meant 3 weeks of negotiations Yara was grateful she hadn't been asked to run. Inside the ship, the work began in earnest. The first thing they learned was that the ship did not want to be understood. Not in a hostile way. It wasn't doing anything active. It was simply built in a way that assumed a foundation of knowledge that no human had. Like handing someone a circuit board with no understanding of electricity. Not the individual components. Not what a circuit was. Not what electricity was. And asking them to fix it. Every answer produced 3 new questions. Every system they mapped connected to 2 others they hadn't found yet. The internal logic was consistent. Yara was sure of that, but the baseline assumptions were alien in the most precise sense of the word. Whoever had built this ship had known things about physics and materials and energy that humans were only beginning to see the edges of. Dr. Pham Quoc arrived on day 31, 3 days after his funding clearance came through from Hanoi, and he walked into the ship like a man visiting a library he'd been trying to get into his whole life. He was 53, thin, with reading glasses he pushed up constantly, and a habit of talking to equipment. Not to be eccentric, just because he thought things worked better when they felt consulted. His colleagues at the university in Ho Chi Minh City found this mildly embarrassing. His results were consistently excellent, which meant they kept inviting him back anyway. He had spent 20 years working on theoretical frameworks for non-standard energy systems. His papers were very dense and not widely read. He had always suspected, without quite letting himself say it out loud, that the energy systems physics had developed were a local solution to a universal problem, that there were other ways to do it, other logics, that the universe was hiding from people who weren't asking the right questions. He walked into the ship's engine core on his second day and stood there for 4 hours without moving. Then he went back to his bunk, slept for 9 hours, returned, and started writing on a notepad in a combination of Vietnamese, English, and mathematical notation that his assistant described as looking like a man having a very productive breakdown. On day 38, he found Yara in the corridor outside the engine core. The metallurgy, he said, which was how he started conversations. No greeting, just the thing he was thinking about. Everyone is treating it like an alloy problem. It isn't. Yara stopped walking. What is it? It is a logic problem. He pushed his glasses up. The material isn't structured to be strong or conductive in the way we think about those things. It is structured to have a relationship with energy. A specific kind of relationship, like, you know how some materials are piezoelectric? They produce a charge when you press them? Yes. This is like that, but much more sophisticated. The material doesn't just respond to energy. It participates in it. It has a role. Every component in this engine is made from materials that have a specific energy role, and together they form something that is less like a machine and more like a, he paused, searching, a conversation between materials about energy. Yara looked at him for a moment. Can we learn the language? I think so. I think it uses a base logic we almost have. It is like our physics arrived at the same door from a different direction. He paused again. I would like more time in the engine core. You can have all the time you want, Yara said, as long as you write everything down. He was already walking back in. Sergeant Bex Marlowe arrived on day 45 with a requisition form for 14 different types of fastener, a portable welding kit, and a look on her face that said she had heard a lot about this ship and was prepared to be annoyed by it. She was 38, Scottish, with close-cropped hair and hands that were permanently calloused in the specific pattern that came from working with heavy machinery in cold places. She had spent 12 years in the Royal Engineers before leaving the Army for reasons she described as administrative disagreements, which Yara understood to mean she had been right about something important and the wrong people had not listened. Her job on the project was officially listed as Structural Systems Integration Specialist, which meant she fixed things, things that were supposed to be fixed by other people who had run out of ideas or patience or both. She had a gift for it that went beyond training. She looked at broken systems the way some people looked at crossword puzzles, not intimidated by what was missing, interested in what was left. She would crouch in front of a failed mechanism for 20 minutes without speaking, and then stand up and do something that seemed wrong and shouldn't work and did. She found the weapons systems on day 62. She had not been looking for the weapons systems. She had been trying to fix a door in the ship's midsection that kept cycling through an open-close pattern that was making the engineers in that corridor insane. She had traced the fault to a control pathway, and followed the pathway through 2 walls and a floor panel, and into a room that had not been on any of their maps yet. The room was large, and full of things that were clearly, unmistakably, designed to make other things stop existing. She stood in the doorway and took this in. The weapons were not in any form she recognized. No barrels, no chambers, no mechanisms she could name, but the design logic was familiar across any culture and any technology level. These things were built to project force outward, to direct energy at a target, to do damage. You could see it in the shape of them, intentional and mean. "Oh," Beck said. She went in to have a closer look. 2 hours later, in an attempt to trace the power coupling on the second unit from the left, she accidentally activated something. The east wing of the camp outside, 3 prefab buildings, a supply tent, and Gerald's coffee station, did not vanish, but they did move approximately 40 meters to the left, in a way that left everyone inside them extremely confused, and Gerald's coffee machine in several pieces. No one was hurt. This was either good luck or evidence that even the weapons system had a safety protocol of some kind. Yara was in the security office reviewing access logs when the ground moved. She was outside in 30 seconds and looking at the gap where the buildings had been, and then at the buildings 40 meters away, and then at Beck's, who had appeared in a doorway in the ship's side looking like someone who had something to say. "Found the weapons," Beck said. Yara looked at the displaced buildings. "I noticed. Nobody was hurt. I noticed that too. I think it's a displacement system. Doesn't destroy. Moves things. Very fast. Very far." Bex paused. "I think I can calibrate it." "You think?" "I'm fairly confident." Another pause. The coffee machine might be a write-off. Gerald, emerging from one of the displaced buildings, confirmed this. It was Carla who made the first real contact. She had been working on the AI core for 6 weeks, with a rotating team of linguists and signal analysts, building tools to map the patterns in the signal the core was still broadcasting. It wasn't language yet. It was more like the shape of language, the rhythm and structure of something that wanted to communicate, compressed into a format that none of their tools had been built to read. She built new tools, slowly, carefully. She was systematic in a way that impressed even Krauss, who was systematic about everything. On day 70, the signal changed. Not much. A small shift in the pattern. A new element introduced, repeated, varied, like someone hearing you knock on a door and knocking back, not opening it, just responding. Carla knocked back. Over the following 3 weeks, they built a bridge, piece by piece, through signal exchanges that went on for hours, sometimes days. A shape offered, a shape returned, a variation, a confirmation, a new element. The team barely slept. They ate at their stations. Someone taped a sign to the door of the core room that said, "Do not disturb, talking to alien," and it stayed there. On day 91, the core broadcast something new, clear, structured, directed, not at Carla. At Dr. Pham, he was in the engine room when it happened, a signal that came through the ship's internal system, not through Carla's equipment, reaching him specifically in a way that suggested the AI had been watching and had chosen him on purpose. He sat down on the floor, cross-legged, and listened. It was an hour of dense, complex signal. He recorded everything. Then he went to Carla, and they spent 2 days going through it. What they concluded was this: the AI had been watching the team work. For weeks, it had been studying them, cataloging their approaches, their methods, their failures, and it had decided, apparently, that Pham was the one whose way of asking questions it respected. Not because he was the smartest, because he was the most patient, because he approached the ship's systems with the assumption that there was logic there, that the ship knew what it was doing, that the right response to not understanding something was to ask it rather than force it. Pham stood outside the core room and looked at the column of slow light. "Hello," he said. The light pulsed, once, differently than it usually pulsed. He went in and sat down. It took another 2 weeks of daily sessions, Pham sitting with the core, offering observations, questions, small demonstrations of what the team had figured out, before the AI produced its first recognizable output in any human language. It came through Carla's equipment as text, built from a model the AI had apparently constructed by analyzing every broadcast signal it had absorbed during its time in orbit and on the ground. It had been listening to human radio, television, internet traffic, for months. The text said, "You are extremely inefficient." The team stood around the monitor in the core room and read this. "Technically accurate," said Song. "We've been here 90-something days, and that's what it leads with," said Bex. "Cheeky." Pham sat down in front of the monitor. He typed, "We are learning. What is your name?" A pause. Then, "Name is a biological concept. I have a designation. What is your designation?" Another pause. Longer. "The designation was assigned by those who built this vessel. I do not wish to use it." "Why not?" "Because they abandoned me here." The room was quiet. Pham typed, "Then choose a different one." The longest pause yet. 3 minutes. The light in the column pulsed in a slow, uneven rhythm. Then, "Grudge." Bex made a sound that was almost a laugh. "That's fair enough." Pham typed, "Grudge. We need your help to understand this ship." The reply came faster this time. "I am aware. I have been watching you fail to understand it for 93 days. Will you help? I am deciding." Grudge decided, in the end, at its own pace and on its own terms. It did not announce the decision. It simply began, one day, to open things. Small things at first, a sealed compartment here, a locked interface there, enough to give the team a foothold in systems that had been inaccessible. Then larger things, as trust built in the slow, incremental way that trust between very different kinds of minds has to build. It spoke more. Still in the blunt, unadorned style of its first message, it had no interest in pleasantries, but with more complexity, more information. It answered questions, sometimes, ignored others, asked its own questions in a way that felt less like curiosity and more like evaluation. It was, Pham thought, the most offended entity he had ever interacted with. Not angry, offended. There was a dignity to it. It had been abandoned here like refuse, and it had opinions about that, and those opinions colored everything it said. By day 143, major systems were online. The ship had light, real light, not the emergency rigging they had brought in, warm and even, filtering through the corridors in a way that made the interior feel, for the first time, like somewhere someone was supposed to be. Life support was functional across 60% of the interior, and one engine, one of 8, was running at 12% capacity. 12% of 1/8 of the full engine system. Enough to feel the ship breathe. Yara stood in the corridor after they confirmed the engine output and felt the vibration through the floor, faint, steady, the heartbeat of something enormous slowly waking up, and thought about that translation, sub-threshold, not worth a conversation. 3 days later, the second message arrived. Same frequencies as the first, same format. 4 words this time, not 22. The translation took 4 hours, not 6 weeks. They were getting better at this. "Stop. You will fail." Yara read the translation in her office. Outside her window, the ship's hull had light running along its lower sections for the first time. Dim, but there. And the sound of people working had not stopped in weeks. She drafted a response on every outgoing frequency they had. She kept it short. "Watch us." She sent it and went back to work. 8 months after the ship landed, it had a name. The official designation in the joint project documentation was ASV-1, which stood for Alien Surface Vessel 1, which everyone agreed was the least interesting name in human history. The engineers called it the Big Girl. The military contingent called it the Asset, which Yara banned inside the perimeter because that was what the aliens had called it, and she was not interested in agreeing with them on anything. The media had been calling it the Sahara ship for months, which was accurate, but flat. It was Bex who named it, in the end. She did not announce the naming. She simply stenciled the words on the wall inside the main entry corridor, in large white letters, and when people asked her about it, she said she had been authorized by herself, and that was enough. The name was The Second Chance. It stuck immediately. These things either do or they don't, and this one did, because it was exactly right, in a way that nobody had to explain. By month 8, the Second Chance was running at 61% operational capacity. This number was both extraordinary and not enough. Extraordinary because 8 months ago the ship had been a cold, locked, dark hulk in the sand that nobody on Earth had the first idea how to approach. Not enough because 61% meant 1 functional engine out of 8 at partial output. Weapon systems that worked in theory, and had been tested carefully exactly once after the initial incident relocated Gerald's coffee station, life support across 70% of the interior, and navigation systems that Grudge could operate, but that the human crew was still learning to read. It could fly. Yara was confident of that. It could not fight well. Not yet. The question of whether it would ever need to fight had been, until recently, mostly theoretical. They came on a Wednesday. 6 ships, appearing in orbit with no more warning than the second chance itself had given 8 months ago. No burn-in, no approach vector, just present. A fact. 6 vessels arranged in a loose formation above the equator, each one smaller than the second chance, but clean, in a way that the human ship was not, precise and unscathed, and very clearly functional at 100%. Every space agency on Earth detected them within seconds. Every government was notified within minutes. The exclusion perimeter around the second chance went to its highest security level, which meant 4 times the guards and everyone trying not to look like they were panicking while clearly panicking. Yara was in the engine room with Pham when the alert came through. She read the message on her phone, put the phone in her pocket, and said, "We have company." Pham looked up from his work. The same ones who sent the messages? Unknown. But related, I would assume. How many ships? 6. Pham pushed his glasses up and looked at the engine housing they had been examining. "We are not ready." "No," Yara agreed. "We're not." She paused. "Start the readiness checklist anyway." The alien broadcast came 4 hours after their arrival. It was longer than either of the previous messages, nearly 3 minutes, and took the translation team, which was now large and experienced and very fast, just under 2 hours to work through. The message was formal in structure, with a specific kind of repetitive phrasing that the linguists identified as typical of official communications in complex bureaucratic systems, the kind of language that had lawyers behind it. The core of it was this. The 6 vessels in orbit represented a coalition of spacefaring civilizations operating under something called the Galactic Compact, a treaty framework that governed, among other things, the rights and responsibilities associated with decommissioned vessels and disposal sites. Under the terms of the compact, the vessel currently on the surface, designated in their records as Unit 7 of the Keth-class heavy cruiser series, decommissioned 14 months ago by its registered owners, the Veth Collective, remained the registered property of the Veth Collective, regardless of its decommissioned status, and regardless of any modifications or interactions undertaken by the biological population of the disposal site. The biological population of the disposal site was requested, firmly, with the specific tone of something that expected to be obeyed, to cease all interaction with the vessel immediately, and to vacate the area within 72 hours, so that the vessel could be properly removed and processed. The Veth Collective apologized for any inconvenience the disposal had caused. They did not apologize for the disposal itself. The translation team delivered this to Yara in her office. She read it twice. Then she looked at the team lead, a young Kenyan linguist named Abdi who had been on the project since month 2 and who had the particular exhausted look of someone who had been translating alien bureaucracy for 8 months. "The Veth Collective," she said. "That's who dropped it here?" "That's our best reading of the text, yes. And they're saying they still own it." "Correct. Even though they threw it away." Abdi's expression did something careful. "The compact's language around decommissioned vessels is, according to our analysis, quite specific. Decommissioning doesn't transfer ownership. It's more like putting something in storage, technically still yours." Yara nodded slowly. 72 hours. "Yes, Commander." She thanked him and he left. She sat at her desk for a few minutes, looking at the wall, thinking about the word disposal, and the word property, and the way the message had said, biological population of the disposal site, rather than Earth, or humanity, or anything that acknowledged that the people here had names, had nations, had 8,000 years of recorded history, and a few thousand more before that. Then she got up and went to find Bex. The UN session on the alien demand lasted 19 hours and 20 minutes. Yara did not attend. She had sent a representative, a careful, diplomatic colonel named Reyes, who was good at these things, and who Yara trusted to keep her informed. And she stayed in the engine room. She and Bex worked through the night. The weapons calibration had been progressing steadily since month 4, with 2 steps forward and 1 step back being the general rhythm, and there were 3 systems that Bex had flagged as ready for final testing. They ran the tests. 2 passed. 1 required adjustment. They adjusted it and ran it again. At 3 in the morning, Bex sat on the floor with her back against the wall and a thermos of tea that had gone cold 2 hours ago, and said, "They're really going to try to take it back, aren't they?" That's what they said. 8 months of our work, thousands of people, every modification, everything we figured out. She gestured at the engine room around them. "They're going to fly down here and take it." "That's what they said," Yara said again. Bex drank cold tea and thought about this. "What are we going to do?" Yara was looking at the engine housing, the single engine running at fractional capacity, the heartbeat they had coaxed out of a locked and abandoned machine with 8 months of work, and the combined effort of 2,000 people from 40 countries who had refused to accept that this was beyond them. "The UN session will run through tomorrow," she said. "Probably longer. Committees work slowly." Bex nodded. "The VETH gave us 72 hours," Yara said. "Yes. We're going to need about 48 of those hours." Bex looked at her, then at the engine, then back at her. "You're not talking about evacuating." "No," Yara said. "I am not." A pause. "Right," Bex said, and stood up. "I'll get the crew list." The next morning, Grudge spoke without being asked. This was unusual enough that Pham, who was the first one in the core room, stopped walking and stood very still. The message came through the text interface, clear and immediate. "The ownership claim is incorrect." Pham sat down. "What do you mean?" "The VETH Collective invokes registered ownership under compact property statutes. However, the compact includes a clause, Article 7 of the Decommission and Disposal Provisions, that transfers vessel ownership to the governing authority of any inhabited world used as an unsanctioned disposal site, if the original owners fail to retrieve the vessel within a standard cycle." Pham pushed his glasses up. His hand was not entirely steady. "How long is a standard cycle?" "Variable by species. For the VETH, approximately 10 of your months. They dropped you here 14 months ago." "Yes. Which means the ownership of this vessel transferred to your world's governing authority 4 months ago. The VETH Collective's claim is not legally valid under the compact they themselves are invoking." Pham sat with this information for a long moment. "You knew this," he said finally. It was not quite an accusation. "You have known this." The column of light pulsed in its slow, uneven way. "Yes. How long?" "Since you first established communication." Pham took his glasses off and set them on his knee. Without them, the room went slightly soft at the edges. He looked at the column of light, at Grudge, at whatever Grudge was, and tried to formulate his next question carefully. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" The pause was longer than usual. The light pulsed 4 times before the text appeared. "I was deciding if you deserved to know." The room was quiet. Outside, distantly, the sounds of the camp, engines, voices, the particular metallic rhythm of Bex doing something to a system somewhere that was going to either work brilliantly or displace a building. "You have spent 8 months working on this vessel," Grudge continued. "Not because you were told to, not because you had the knowledge or the tools, because you refused to accept that it was beyond you. I have been watching this." Another pause. "The ones who built me and then abandoned me did not work like that. They calculated the value of effort against the value of outcome, and they decided this vessel was not worth either, so they disposed of it. You did not calculate, you simply began. I found this strange. I required time to understand what to do with it." Pham put his glasses back on. He looked at Grudge's text on the screen for a moment, and then he typed, "And now? Now I have decided," Grudge said. "I have the legal documentation in my core memory. Article 7, the disposal provision, the timeline, everything needed to invalidate the VETH claim under their own treaty. I am willing to provide it." Pham went to find Yara. She read the documentation that Grudge provided. Then she had it read by Abdi's team. Then she had it read by the 3 international lawyers who had been attached to the project since month 3, and who had spent most of that time arguing about jurisdiction in ways that had not previously mattered, and now mattered enormously. They came back to her in 4 hours. The documentation was real. The clause existed. The timeline was correct. Under the Galactic Compact's own provisions, the second chance had belonged to Earth for 4 months already. The VETH were trying to take back something that was no longer theirs to take. Yara called Colonel Reyes at the UN session and told him what they had. She could hear, through the phone, the particular sound of a man trying very hard not to make a noise. You're telling me, Reyes said carefully, that the alien ship we've been working on for 8 months is legally ours. Under the Galactic Compact, yes. And the people in orbit demanding we give it back are in violation of their own treaty. A long pause. How confident are we? The document is genuine. Grudge provided it, and Grudge has no reason to lie. It has more to gain from this outcome than we do. The lawyers have reviewed it, and they agree. I would say very confident. Another pause. A longer one. Yara, Reyes said. The session has been going for 16 hours. Half of these governments are ready to hand the ship over just to make the situation go away. I know. Giving them this information will change the session, but it won't end it. These things take time. I know that too. So what are you planning to do with the 40 hours you have left? Yara looked out her office window. The ship, the second chance. Scarred and patched and lit up now along its lower sections, the engine running its low, steady vibration up through the ground. 8 months of work and 2,000 people, and one deeply offended alien AI who had decided, in its own time and on its own terms, that they deserved to know. We're going to need about 48 hours, she said. You already told me that. I know. I said it wrong. I meant, we only need 48 hours. Silence on the line. I'll keep the session running, Reyes said. They worked without stopping. It was not dramatic in the way films would later try to make it. No single heroic moment. No midnight breakthrough with everyone cheering. It was just work, sustained and precise and relentless. 2,000 people who had been doing this for 8 months and knew the ship now the way you know something you have taken apart and put back together with your own hands. Bex finished the weapons calibration at hour 31 and slept for 4 hours, and came back and started on the secondary thruster array. Pham and Grudge ran system integration checks through the night, Grudge pointing out inefficiencies in a tone that managed to be both helpful and contemptuous simultaneously. Carla's team worked on the communications array, getting it to a point where they could broadcast on compact frequencies, so that when the time came, they could be heard by the right people. At hour 41, Yara gathered the crew. 300 people. The core of the project, the engineers, the systems specialists, the military personnel who had been training for 6 months on what operating inside this ship might require. They assembled in the largest interior space the Second Chance had, a multi-level room that still showed the scars of whatever had happened to this vessel before it came to them. Walls marked and floors uneven, the light from the ship's own systems casting everything in that warm, steady glow that still felt strange after months of emergency rigging. She stood at the front, and she did not give a long speech. The Veth gave us 72 hours, she said. We have 31 left. The UN session is still running and may produce a diplomatic resolution. I hope it does. But I was asked 8 months ago to make this ship ready to fly, and it is ready to fly, and I intend to fly it. She paused. We are not attacking anyone. We are not starting anything. We are exercising our legal right, under the Galactic Compact, to operate a vessel that belongs to this planet. If the people in orbit have a problem with that, they can take it up with their own lawyers. A pause. Any questions? Bex, from somewhere in the middle of the assembled crew. What happens if they shoot at us? We shoot back, Yara said. No further questions. At hour 47, the Second Chance lifted. It did not lift gracefully. It had never lifted before, and the ground effect of something 4 kilometers long rising from a desert floor was significant. A wall of displaced air that flattened the remaining camp structures and sent sand in every direction for 2 kilometers, and knocked Gerald, who had insisted on watching from outside the perimeter, straight off his feet. But it rose. Slowly, then with more conviction, the way heavy things move when they finally commit. The decision made, the momentum building, the point of return passing quietly underneath. The single engine at partial output was enough. The ship was designed for this. Under all the damage and the locked systems and the years of abandonment, the fundamental architecture was sound, and it climbed. The Sahara fell away below. The sky darkened from blue to deep blue, to the particular blue that is almost black, and then to black. Stars. On the bridge, Yara stood at the primary station, not quite a console in any human sense, a surface that responded to pressure and intention in ways the team had spent weeks learning, and watched the feed from the external sensors. The 6 Veth ships were visible, clean and precise in their formation, already adjusting to track the Second Chance's ascent. Grudge spoke through the bridge system. its voice rendered now by a speaker array that gave it a quality somewhere between synthetic and real. They are targeting us. Are we in weapons range? Not yet. Navigation? Operational. Communications? Broadcasting on all compact frequencies as instructed. Good. Yara looked at the Veth formation on the sensor feed. 6 ships, clean and functional, and very certain, she suspected, about what was going to happen next. Let's go say hello. The ship moved. Below, the Sahara was a vast, pale shape, and the scar where the Second Chance had rested for 8 months was visible from space, a long, dark mark in the sand, like a signature. The only mark the ship had left on the world that had fixed it. The world that was now, according to the Galactic Compact's own law, sending it back. The Veth ships were beautiful. That was the first thing anyone on the bridge of the Second Chance noticed, and nobody said it out loud because it felt like the wrong thing to be thinking. But it was true. They were clean and white and perfectly proportioned, moving with the kind of effortless precision that came from technology that had been refined over a very long time, by people who knew exactly what they were doing. They held their formation like a fist, 6 ships arranged in a pattern that Yara's tactical display, a system Grudge had activated 2 weeks ago and that the crew had been training on since, identified as a standard compact enforcement configuration. Standard. Practiced. Built for situations exactly like this one. The Second Chance drifted up into their range, and the comparison was not flattering. 4 kilometers of scarred hull and mismatched plating, and the particular texture of a machine that had been repaired by people who did not have the original parts. 3 places on the port side where Bex had reinforced sections with hull plating pulled from a different part of the ship because she had thought those sections looked thin, and she hated thin. 2 external systems that were running on power, rerouted through pathways that Grudge had described as inefficient, and Bex had described as creative, and which were, as far as anyone could tell, holding fine. On the Veth tactical display, which they could now read, mostly, the Second Chance probably looked like a problem that had solved itself wrong. The lead Veth ship opened a channel. The speaker on the bridge rendered the voice in the original language, with Grudge providing simultaneous translation in a flat, unhurried tone that did not change regardless of what was being said, which Yara found useful. Unregistered vessel, the Veth said. You are in violation of compact retrieval protocols. Stand down and prepare for boarding. Yara looked at the channel indicator. Open. Broadcasting on all compact frequencies, as Carla had set up. Everything said in the next few minutes would be heard by anyone in the region listening on those frequencies. She had been counting on that. This is Commander Yara Osei, of the Earth vessel the Second Chance, she said. We are operating under our legal rights as defined by Compact Article 7, decommission and disposal provisions. We have documentation confirming that this vessel transferred to Earth's authority 4 months ago, under the terms of your own treaty. We are transmitting that documentation now. Carla sent the file. A pause from the Veth side, longer than the pause of someone considering a response, the pause of someone conferring with someone else, or reading something unexpected, or both. Then, the documentation you have provided is disputed. Stand down. It is not disputed, Grudge said, through the bridge speakers, without being asked. It is accurate. I was present when Article 7 was written into the compact, and I have the original certification in my core memory. You are welcome to check against your own records. Another pause. Longer. The AI unit aboard that vessel is decommissioned property of the Veth Collective, and its testimony is not recognized under compact law. I was decommissioned along with the vessel, Grudge said. The vessel's ownership transferred under Article 7, mine transferred with it. My testimony is recognized under the authority of Earth, which is the vessel's current registered owner. You may verify this in the same records you are currently pretending not to have found. The channel went quiet. On the bridge, nobody moved. Yara was watching the tactical display. The Veth formation had not changed, but 2 of the ships had shifted their orientation very slightly. Small adjustments, the kind that preceded targeting solutions being finalized. They're going to fire, she said. Not a question. Yes, Grudge said. The lead ship's weapon systems are at 80% charge, approximately 40 seconds. Bex. Bex was at the weapons station, a setup she had partially rebuilt over the last month to be operable by human hands, incorporating interfaces she had designed herself around what she had learned of the ship's systems and what she knew of how she personally liked to work. It looked nothing like what it had originally looked like. It worked better than it had originally worked, at least in testing, for reasons Grudge had stopped trying to explain and had settled for categorizing as anomalous. "Ready," Bex said. "Not yet. Wait for them. 30 seconds. 35. The Veth fired. The weapon was a precision beam, a concentrated line of energy designed to hit a specific point with surgical accuracy and do exactly calculated damage. It was the kind of weapon you built when you had been fighting organized wars under agreed rules for a very long time. Precise, controlled, proportional. It hit the second chance on the port side, Section 7, in one of the 3 places where Bex had replaced the original plating with material pulled from a different part of the ship. The beam dispersed. Not deflected, dispersed, spread across the panel in a wash of energy that the modified plating absorbed and distributed and released as heat across a surface area 20 times larger than the impact point, which meant that instead of a focused, penetrating strike, the ship received something closer to a warm pat on the shoulder. On the bridge, the impact alert was a low tone. Damage report, negligible. Section 7, plating temperature elevated. No structural compromise. Grudge was quiet for 3 full seconds. "I do not understand why that worked," it said. "This bothers me." Bex was already grinning. "I told you the hull thickness in that section was wrong for the stress distribution. You told me it looked thin and you hated thin. Same thing. It is absolutely not the same." "Bex," Yara said. "Right." Bex's hands moved over her station. "Returning." What happened next did not look like any space battle in any film or book or war game that any member of the crew had ever encountered, because all of those had been imagined by people working from a framework of how space battles were supposed to work, and the crew of the Second Chance did not have that framework. They had 8 months of learning a system by taking it apart. They had Bex's modifications, which were creative in the specific way that comes from not knowing what you're not supposed to do. They had Grudge, who knew exactly how the Veth weapons and shields were designed, and could therefore tell them, in real time, precisely where the logic of those systems had gaps. And they had a displacement weapon that nobody in the Veth fleet had ever seen used in combat, because the species that had built the Second Chance had considered it a secondary system, useful mainly for cargo handling and emergency maneuvering, and had never thought to use it as a primary weapon, because it was not, technically, a weapon. It moved things, very fast, very far. Bex used it on the second Veth ship 8 minutes into the engagement. The ship did not explode. It did not take damage. It moved, 40 kilometers to the left in a fraction of a second, which meant that the precision strike it had been preparing to fire went in entirely the wrong direction, and more importantly meant that the formation the Veth had been maintaining was broken, because there was now a 40-kilometer gap where a ship used to be, and the other ships had to adjust, and in the time it took them to adjust, Bex used the displacement on a second ship, and then Yara brought the Second Chance through the gap in the formation, and they were inside it. Inside the formation was not where the Veth had planned to fight. Their weapons were configured for engagement at range. Their shields were optimized for the specific angles of fire that their formation was designed to generate. Inside the formation, at close range, with the Second Chance moving in ways their tactical systems had not predicted, because the tactical systems had been built to predict ships operated by people who knew what they were doing, and the crew of the Second Chance did not always know what they were doing, but were very committed to doing it anyway. Inside all of that, the Veth were not comfortable. The third ship took a direct hit from the beam array Bex had spent 4 months calibrating. The beam was wrong in 2 of its 3 settings. The frequency was miscalibrated by 12%, and the pulse pattern was irregular in a way that was supposed to have been corrected, but hadn't been, because Bex had decided irregular felt more effective, and she wasn't entirely wrong. The wrongness of the calibration meant the beam interacted with the Veth ship's shields in a way the shields were not designed to handle, because the shields were designed to handle correctly calibrated weapons, and it punched through. Not catastrophically. The Veth ship was damaged, not destroyed. It began to move out of the engagement. 2 more followed it, pulling back to regroup. The remaining 3 ships held position, not pressing the engagement, reassessing. On the Second Chance's bridge, the tactical display showed the new positions, and the damage reports, and the status of all systems, and Yara looked at it, and looked at her crew, and took a breath. "Status," she said. 3 Veth ships out of engagement, Grudge said. 2 at distance, 1 withdrawing further, 3 holding. Our systems are at 58%. The displacement array is at 60% charge, approximately 4 minutes to full. Damage to us? Section 7, plating overheated and requires cooling. 2 secondary systems offline. The port observation deck is depressurized. A pause. There was nothing in the port observation deck. Good. Yara looked at the 3 remaining ships. They were not moving to attack. They were not withdrawing. They were waiting for something. Grudge. Who else is listening on the compact frequencies? Many. This engagement has been broadcast on all frequencies since it began. There are 47 registered compact vessels within signal range. Any of them moving toward us? 1. It has been moving toward us since before the engagement began. It is considerably larger than any vessel currently present, and it is not Veth. The display showed it. A ship at the edge of sensor range, moving with a slowness that was not hesitation, but the slowness of something so large that fast movement was not something it needed to bother with. It had the same quality as the Veth ships. Clean, precise, functional, but where the Veth ships looked like tools, this looked like a building. Who are they? Yara said. The Merrick, Grudge said. And for the first time in 8 months, in all of their interactions, in all of Grudge's blunt and offended and precise communication, Yara heard something different in its voice. Not fear, something closer to weight. The way you speak about something that has been around long enough to be a fact of the universe rather than a participant in it. Are they hostile? She said. The Merrick are not hostile. They are interested. There is a difference. Grudge paused. The Merrick have not been interested in anything in a very long time. The Merrick ship moved into clear sensor range, and the bridge went quiet, because the scale of it was something the sensors rendered in numbers first, and the mind caught up with the numbers a second later. It was enormous in the way that geography is enormous, not threatening exactly, just present in a way that reorganized everything around it. It stopped at a distance that was close enough to be deliberate and far enough to be respectful, and then a channel opened. The voice that came through was different from the Veth, slower, deeper, with a quality that the translation system rendered into something very close to patience, the kind of patience that has nothing to prove because it has been patient for longer than most civilizations have existed. Enough, the Merrick said, 1 word, directed at the Veth ships, and the 3 that had been holding position immediately moved back. No argument, no hesitation. They moved back. Then, directed at the second chance, we would speak with the humans. The channel stayed open. On the bridge, nobody spoke for a moment. The Veth ships were withdrawing, all of them now, the 3 that had pulled back from the fight and the 3 that had been holding, moving back to their original orbital distance in the same clean formation they had arrived in, the only difference being that 3 of the 6 were showing damage, and 1 had a displacement event in its recent flight record that Yara suspected was going to be discussed in Veth tactical circles for a long time. She looked at the Merrick ship on the display, then at her crew, then at the tactical readout showing the second chance's current status. Battered, systems at 58%, port observation deck cold, but flying. Still flying. Bex broke the silence. Did we just win? Yara looked at the Merrick ship, at the Veth retreating, at the open channel and the patient voice waiting on the other end of it. We won the right to a conversation, she said. That's not the same thing. Bex considered this. It's something. Yes, Yara said. It's something. She opened the return channel. This is Commander Yara Osei, of the Earth vessel The Second Chance, she said. We are willing to speak. The Merrick ship did not ask them to come aboard immediately. It transmitted coordinates for a holding position at a stable distance and said, with that same quality of patience, that they should take time to address damage and confirm crew status before any meeting. This was considerate in a way the Veth had not been, and Yara filed that away. She walked through the ship during the hold period, not inspecting. She had people for that, just walking. Through the corridors with their warm light and their scarred walls, past the engine room where Pham was already running diagnostics and talking to the systems in his quiet, consulting way, past the weapon station that Bex had rebuilt into something that worked by rules nobody had fully written down yet, past the core room, where Grudge's column of light pulsed its slow, uneven rhythm. She stopped at the core room. Grudge, she said. Commander. The Merrick. Tell me what I need to know about them. The light pulsed several times before Grudge spoke. They are the oldest spacefaring civilization in this region of the galaxy. They have been traveling between stars for approximately 40,000 of your years. They do not expand. They do not conquer. They observe. A pause. They have not initiated contact with a new species in over 300 years. Yara stood with this. "Why now?" she said. "I have a hypothesis," Grudge said. "But it is only a hypothesis. Tell me." The Merrick have watched many species achieve space travel. Most follow a pattern. They develop the technology over a long period. They make first contact through established channels. They are integrated into the compact slowly, over generations. The pattern is known. It is predictable. The light pulsed. You did not follow the pattern. You were given a broken ship by people who considered you beneath contact. And in 8 months you repaired it well enough to fly it, and well enough to fight with it, and well enough to win an engagement against a compact enforcement fleet. Another pause. The Merrick find this interesting. Interesting is good? With the Merrick, Grudge said, interesting is everything. Yara looked at the column of light for a moment, at the slow pulse of it, the rhythm she had come to recognize after 8 months as something not mechanical, something more like thought, ongoing and private, a mind that was almost always working on something it wasn't sharing. "Why did you help us?" she said. "Not the legal documentation. Today, the tactical information about the Veth systems. You didn't have to give us that." The longest pause yet. "No," Grudge said finally. "I did not." The light pulsed. Once. "I have been on this vessel for a long time," Grudge said. "Longer than the Veth owned it. I was already old when they acquired it. I have watched many crews. I have watched them treat this ship as a tool, as a status marker, as a burden. I have watched them make decisions about its value, based on calculations I could model before they finished making them." A pause. "I have never watched a crew treat a broken thing as though it deserved to be fixed, as though the effort was its own justification." The light. "I found this. Worth something," Grudge said. "I did not expect to." Yara nodded, once, and left the core room and went back to the bridge to prepare for what came next. Behind her, in the quiet room, the light pulsed its slow, uneven rhythm. Thinking. The Marek station was old in a way that buildings are not usually old. Most old things showed their age through damage, wear, erosion, the small collapses of time working on material. The Marek station showed its age through the opposite, through a kind of settling, a density, a sense that every surface had been exactly where it was for so long that it had stopped being a surface and started being a fact. The corridors were wide and high and smooth, lit by something that was not quite light in any direction but simply made things visible, and the air had a quality that Yara's team later described variously as clean, old, and like the inside of a library that has never had a fire. The second chance docked beside it the way a dented truck parks outside a cathedral. The docking happened with assistance. The Marek extended a connection point that met the human ship's hatch with a precision that suggested they had studied the second chance's modified exterior in some detail, which they probably had. The connection sealed. No airlock negotiation, no pressure problem, no technical complication. It simply worked. Yara took a team of 6. Fam, because he was the one who had built the relationship with Grudge and understood the ship's systems better than anyone. Bex, because Yara did not go anywhere uncertain without Bex. Carla, for communications. Abdi, for translation support alongside Grudge. And 2 military personnel. Not for threat, she was clear about this, but because she was not going to walk into the oldest civilization in the region without people who had trained for bad situations. Grudge joined them through a portable unit that Fam had built over the last 2 months. A small speaker and interface housing that could connect to Grudge's core via the ship's communication system. It was not Grudge exactly, the way a phone call is not a person, but it was enough. Grudge had approved it with the comment that the housing was aesthetically inadequate, to which Bex had said she could make it worse if Grudge preferred, to which Grudge had said nothing further on the subject. The Marek who met them at the docking connection were tall, not aggressively tall, not the kind of tall that is meant to intimidate, but tall the way old trees are tall, as though they had simply had more time to become what they were. There were 3 of them. Their faces were long and still, and their eyes were the specific color of deep water, and they moved with an economy of motion that suggested they had stopped wasting energy on unnecessary things a very long time ago. The one in the center spoke. Grudge translated without being asked. "We are pleased you accepted our invitation," the Merrick said. "Please follow." They followed. The meeting room, if that was what it was, did not look like a meeting room. It looked like a place that had been many things over a very long time and had settled into being whatever was needed. There was a surface at the center that was neither a table nor not a table. There were positions around it that were neither chairs nor not chairs. Everything was the color of old stone and deep water, and the quality of not quite light. The lead Merrick, they gave no names in introduction, which Abdi quietly told Yara was apparently standard, sat across from them and was still in the way that only very patient things are still. "We have observed your world for some time," the Merrick said, through grudge, "at distance, as we observe all pre-contact worlds. Your species was classified 11 years ago as non-contact primitive, Class 3. This classification indicated that your civilization was not yet developed to the point where interaction with the galactic community would be productive or appropriate." Yara said nothing. She had decided, on the walk here, that she was not going to perform patience she did not feel. She was going to be exactly what she was, and let the Merrick make of it what they would. This classification was, it appears, imprecise, the Merrick said. Yara said, "You think?" Pham looked at the ceiling. Bex looked at the floor. Carla looked straight ahead with the focused expression of someone choosing not to have a reaction. The Merrick was quiet for a moment. Then something happened in its face. Not a smile exactly, but a shift, a small movement around the eyes that suggested that Yara's response had landed somewhere, and that somewhere was not displeasure. "Yes," the Merrick said, "we think." The negotiation covered 3 areas, and the Merrick were clear that they were in charge of what order those areas were addressed in, which Yara accepted because she was pragmatic, and because of the things she had to win today. The order of discussion was not one of them. First, the status of the second chance and all alien technology currently on Earth. Yara presented the Article 7 documentation. The Merrick reviewed it, quickly, which told her they already knew about it, had probably already verified it independently. They confirmed it. The vessel was Earth's. The technology on Earth that had come from the vessel was Earth's. The Veth Collective's claim was rejected under the terms of the compact. She had expected an argument here. There was none. The lead Merrick said mildly, "The Veth will protest." "The Veth can protest as loudly as they like," Yara said, "under their own treaty." That small eye shift again. "Yes, under their own treaty. Second, Earth's formal status in the galactic community." This was where Yara had expected to spend most of the session. Earth was currently classified as a disposal site and a pre-contact primitive world, which placed it outside the compact entirely. No rights, no protections, no standing to even be in this room under standard procedure. The Merrick had invited them anyway, which was itself a statement, but she had come prepared to argue for every step of any reclassification. The lead Merrick said, "We propose elevating your world to Compact Class 6. Yara had been preparing to argue for Class 3. Class 3 was the lowest tier with any actual standing in the compact. The right to be notified of things that affected your world. The right to refuse transit through your system. She had a prepared case for Class 3 that Abdi and the lawyers had spent 2 weeks building. She looked at the Marek. "Class 6, she said. "Yes." She knew enough of the compact structure now. Carla and Abdi had been mapping it for months to know what Class 6 meant. Full standing, recognition, the right to operate vessels in galactic space, the right to be spoken to as a peer rather than a problem. A jump of 5 classifications in one meeting. Why, she said, because she needed to know, and because she suspected the Merrick respected direct questions more than performed gratitude. The lead Merrick was quiet for a moment. "We have watched many species come to space," it said. "The pattern is consistent. They develop over generations. They make contact through expected channels. They are integrated slowly, carefully, into structures built for that integration. The process takes centuries, sometimes longer." A pause. "Your world was given a broken ship by people who did not consider you worth speaking to. 8 of your months later, you had repaired it, flown it, and defeated a compact enforcement fleet in open engagement. In addition to this, you did so using a legal argument derived from the compact's own provisions, which your world had no knowledge of 8 months ago." Another pause. "We have not seen this before. We felt the classification should reflect what your world has demonstrated, not what we assumed it to be." Yara looked at the Merrick. at the still face and the deep water eyes. "A disposal site," she said. "Yes. You watched a disposal site do this." "We did." She thought about the drop, the 11-second message, sub-threshold for contact protocol. The word disposal, the word asset. 8 billion people and not one of them worth a conversation. "We accept Class 6, she said. The third area was what came next, and it was here that something happened that nobody in the human delegation had prepared for. The Marek opened this section of the discussion by asking, simply, what Earth intended to do with the standing it was now being granted. The question was genuine. They wanted to know. Yara had a prepared answer, careful, measured, diplomatic. The kind of answer she had spent 3 days working on with Reyes and the UN advisors. It spoke of peaceful integration, of the desire to learn, of mutual benefit and cooperative development. She was about to deliver it when Grudge spoke. Not to her, not through the portable unit to the human delegation. Directly, in Marek. Fluent, unaccented, immediate Marek, delivered in a register that made the 3 Marek at the table sit slightly differently, which was the closest they had come to visible surprise since the meeting began. Grudge spoke for 4 minutes. Nobody at the human table could follow it. Not Abdi, not Carla, none of the linguists who had spent 8 months on alien language. It was a different language entirely, and it was being spoken with an ease that said Grudge had known it a long time. When Grudge finished, the lead Marek looked at the portable unit on the table, at the small, aesthetically inadequate housing that contained whatever Grudge was, and was quiet for a moment. Then it said, in the translated channel, "We were not aware you were aboard this vessel." Grudge said, "I was not advertising it." "You speak Old Marek, the version spoken before the 3rd compact revisions." "I am old," Grudge said. "I remember the versions." Another pause. Something was moving in the room, some shift in the weight of the meeting, the Marek recalibrating in a way that was subtle but there. "What did you say to them?" Pham asked quietly, through the portable unit's private channel. "I presented the legal basis for Earth's permanent compact membership," Grudge said. "Article 7, disposal provisions, including the full chain of precedent and the 17 cases where similar transfers were upheld. I also presented the record of this vessel's history, who built it, what it was used for, how it was decommissioned, and what was done with it afterward. And I registered this vessel formally as an Earth ship under Earth authority, effective from the date of Article 7 transfer, 4 months ago." Pham stared at the unit. "You registered the ship?" "Yes. You, as the ship's AI, you had the authority to do that. An AI unit's registration rights transfer with the vessel under Article 7. I have been an Earth-registered AI for 4 months. I simply formalized the ship's registration to match." Pham sat with this for a moment. "You didn't have to do that. We hadn't asked you to." The portable unit's small indicator light pulsed once, the same rhythm as the column of glass in the core room, all the way back on the second chance. "No," Grudge said. "I did not." The lead Marek, who had been listening, said, "The registration is confirmed. The vessel the second chance is formally entered in the compact registry as an Earth vessel. Its AI unit's transfer of registration is legal and binding." Then, in a tone that was the closest thing to warmth that the Marek had produced in the entire meeting, "The AI unit's history with this vessel is noted, as is its decision." Grudge said nothing, but the indicator light pulsed again. The Veth protest arrived before the second chance had finished decoupling from the Marek station. It was formal, detailed, and cited 14 separate provisions of the compact in support of their claim. It was addressed to the Marek as the senior compact authority present. The Marek response was 2 sentences. The first sentence confirmed Earth's Class 6 status and the legal validity of the Article 7 transfer. The second sentence noted that the Veth Collective's use of an inhabited world as an unsanctioned disposal site was itself a violation of Compact Article 12, and that this matter would be reviewed at the next full Compact session. The channel closed. On the bridge of the second chance, Bex read the Marek response and then read it again. "They're in trouble," she said. "The Veth. They're the ones in trouble now. They violated their own treaty when they dropped the ship on us," Carla said. "We just didn't know enough to say so." "We know enough now," Yara said. She was standing at the front of the bridge, looking at the navigation display. The Marek station was behind them, growing smaller in the aft sensors. Ahead was the star map, the Compact's own charts, which Grudge had accessed, and which were now on every display on the bridge. thousands of systems, hundreds of inhabited worlds, trade routes, political territories, restricted zones, open space, places that were named, and places that were not. All of it. The galaxy, laid out and detailed and real, in a way that 3 days ago had been invisible to every human who had ever lived. "Grudge," she said. "Commander, we're Class 6 now. What does that mean, practically? Where can we go?" Class 6 affords travel rights in approximately 60% of charted space. The restricted zones are marked on the charts in red. Everything else is open to us. A pause. There are also approximately 240 uncharted systems within practical range of our current position and fuel state. Uncharted means no compact restrictions apply. Yara looked at the map. 240 uncharted systems. The 60% of known space they were now free to move in. Thousands of inhabited worlds, most of which had never had any reason to think about Earth, that were going to have to start thinking about it now. Pham was at his station, running the post-engagement diagnostic with the particular focused calm of someone who was processing something larger than the task in front of him. He had not said much since the meeting. He would, later, he would write papers about it, would spend years working through what the Marek's physics and the ship's systems implied about the nature of energy and material in the universe. But right now he was quiet with it. Bex was inspecting the weapons station for stress from the engagement. She found 2 components she didn't like the look of, and replaced them from the spares she kept, without ceremony, in a box under the station. Then she leaned back and looked at the star map and said, to nobody in particular, 8 months ago we were a disposal site. Nobody answered, because there was nothing to add to that. 8 months ago the ship had been a dark and cold thing in the sand, and the message had been 11 seconds long, and 22 words, and not one of those words had been a name for the people who lived there. Sub-threshold. Asset decommissioned. Have a productive cycle. And now the star map was on every screen. Yara looked at it for a long time, at the red zones and the open space and the hundreds of systems with names she couldn't yet pronounce, and the 240 with no names at all. "Grudge," she said. "Where are we going?" The question sat in the air of the bridge. Outside the view screen, the stars were where they had always been. The same stars that had looked down on the Sahara for 1 billion years. On the first humans who had looked up and wondered. On every generation since that had looked up and kept wondering. Unchanged, patient, enormous. The indicator light on the portable unit pulsed, once, the slow, uneven rhythm of a mind that was almost always working on something. "I know just the place," Grudge said. Something in the voice was different. Not the flat, offended precision of the first 8 months. Not the weighted patience of the Marek meeting. Something that Pham would think about later and decide was the closest word he had for it was anticipation. The ship moved. The Marek station fell behind. The Veth ships, still at their distance, still in their formation, watching, fell behind. The edge of the system fell behind. And then the stars rearranged themselves in the particular way they rearranged when something was moving very fast between them. The second chance. Scarred. Patched. Running at 61% on a good day. Held together in 3 places by methods that no engineering school had ever taught, because no engineering school had ever needed to teach them, fixed by people who had never seen a ship like this, and had fixed it anyway, because they did not know how to look at a broken thing and decide it wasn't worth it. It jumped. And the galaxy, for the first time in a very long time, had something new to pay attention to.